So today we're going to talk about, that behavior profiling, influence, and compliance course that I'm offering. Because what I've decided to do after a few years, and Caroline, your hair looks great.
Oh, thank you.
And it's like, I've been thinking about this for a while. It's something I really never thought I was going to teach, right, to the general public. It's like but then some things happened and I share what they are. A friend of mine passed away and he had a couple courses that he had. Elsa Eldridge is one of them, and had the course almost ready to teach, but he never got around to it. And then he, transitions, course never gets done. And I was at a conference, another person I've known for a long time, Roy Hunter. He'd been working on a new course, and then I'm not sure how he's doing. So a lot of people keep asking, but he had a health challenge while he was there. I don't know if it's a heart attack, a stroke, or both, but what I understand, he's still in Orlando. But, again, you never know what's going to change, what's going to happen. So, that, and I will be honest, a lot of the stuff that I decided to teach has been out there, but it's finally been declassified under the Freedom of Information Act, right? Because, they had to declassify all kinds of stuff. And so, I didn't have a non-compete with the agencies I worked with. They just kind of said, yeah, we don't, we ask you really not to do that. So let's talk a little bit about this, right? So what am I going to be teaching in this class? Why is it useful for therapists and coaches and basically entrepreneurs and salespeople? The general public, not necessarily, police interrogators and the other agencies, they use it in different ways, but is what we'll be teaching applicable to the general public? Oh, yes, right? And I like to say that basic NLP, basic and master NLP, is like an X-ray when you're working with somebody. You get you look through what's going on and you kind of see the bones of the structure, right? If you look at medicine, they say when they came up with X-rays, Madame Curie with X-rays changed medicine, right? Because they could actually see how the bones broke and do that. Before they couldn't, right? Great. And then when you add, that's the basic NLP, the visual, the auditory, the kinesthetic. Do you move toward a goal? Do you move away from pain? All the things that we teach, right, in the basic NLP. It's like an X-ray into people, right? And then when you add the master level with waking hypnosis, and NFNLP was the first, what we did was break the code of how to teach waking hypnosis without going down that Ericksonian rabbit hole that makes no sense. It's like, it's really pretty easy. Even Erica said, it's not that hard. You're always communicating. It's like, but people made it all hard, with rules and regulations, and a lot of that was marketing. So, but when you add that, and a little bit of timeline, now you had a deeper X-ray of what's going on with people, right? Which really, lights people up, as I always say, right? You're using the visual, the auditory, the kinesthetic. And, now you're adding the magic words, naturally, easily, effortlessly, aware, notice, realize, the more, all these things that bypass the critical factors in the mind, right? We're getting in one level deeper, right? But now I'm going to add this, because what it is it's going to add, it's more like an MRI, right? I'm trying to figure out how to phrase this stuff, right? This is why it's going to be the beta test that I'm doing first, right? It's like an MRI. But my lovely wife, Christina, I was doing a talk to somebody. I said, it's kind of like one of my favorite movies, an old movie. Many of us have seen it. The Wizard of Oz. It's like kind of like you get to peek behind the curtain. right? The wizard everybody was scared of. He was the all-powerful wizard. And when they pulled back the curtain, he was a little old man that was terrified, right? Maybe not terrified, but he was not what he presented. You peek behind the next level of the curtain. So if you can look at NLP as like the X-ray, you know, when you learn the X-ray, you see through, like you see the structure of what's going on, right? But what I'm going to be teaching here, hopefully, will show you to pull back the curtain of what people are really presenting to the world. So let's say you're in sales, and all salespeople, all therapists, coaches, or salespeople. We got to remember that you're always trying to sell, and you're always doing investigations. You need good information, right? You need, whether you want to say that, if you're a coach and a therapist of any kind, or salespeople, you want to investigate to figure out what's going on with people. Or if you're a parent, you probably want to know what's going on. So anyway, so this is like peeking behind the curtain. So I may just start, if I don't know if it's in the public domain, or I'd love to call it Wizard of Oz training. Peek behind the curtain and see what's going on the inside, right? And a lot of this has to do with a couple of facts that are just true, right? A lot of people here in my group are hypnotists, right? There's few people teaching this kind of stuff that, they were shocked when they went through this kind of training, when they bring in a little bit of hypnosis, a little NLP. It was the NLP world that brought in to the investigation world, the visual, the auditory, the kinesthetic, right? But again, much like everything, as hypnotists, we know this, what we see in the movies and TV is nothing what a real hypnotist does, right? We know that, right? Same with investigations, right? We always see these real strong cops banging, good cop, bad cop. I mean, when you get behind the curtain, it's much different, right? And little facts that a lot of people don't know, right? When a good investigator walks in the room, they never have their badge or their gun on. They don't need it. They already have the power, right? Also, it will throw up the defenses of even if you're just being a witness. They found when the cops come in, if they look casual and they don't have the badge and the gun, you're much more likely to lower your defenses, and also rarely at the elite places, there's only one person in the room at the time. So this idea of good cop, bad cop, they can do that, right? But it's one at a time. They're not in the room together. It splits the control, splits the focus, and a really good narcissist sociopath can play the two against each other, right? When there's one at a time, and it's also the illusion when they walk out of the room, you don't know how many people you're dealing with, right? But when you get behind it, that's where the power is. It's like, how does this work? And where they get this right, not an organization, an industry that picked this up, and it's brilliant. If you've been through it here in America, for my foreign people, I'm not sure if they do the same thing, but in America and Canada, when you go buy a car, right? The salesman's always one-on-one. He may go talk to the sales manager, right? And the use of language, this is the kind of stuff I'll be breaking down. It's the use of language. Let's go see what kind of deal we can do. First of all, we, me and you, but also them. You don't know how many people they're dealing with. Of course, if you know car dealers, they probably go outside, drink a cup of coffee, shoot the shit, talk about sports, and then come back. They're not really wheeling and dealing, right? But it's one-on-one. And then they pass you off, just like they would do in a negotiation or an investigation, to the finance manager, right? And all these little things, right? And so it's like, when you look behind the curtain, it's really pretty cool, right? But you have to realize there's a few things going on, right? That all people are suggestible. And that's, and so, they make a big deal out of it. But did you know your suggestibilities, is all based on one basic brain chemical? I've never really talked about this, right? If you've taken hypnosis, wonder if you've ever heard this, right? And basically it's this. every human on the planet is a drug addict. We're all drug addicts. It's what drugs you're really addicted to. And I don't mean externally, I mean internally. Your dopamine, your serotonin, your GABA, your glutamate, right? You're addicted to those. In fact, a lot of argument now in addiction is the drug is irrelevant if it's a drug addict, external drug addict, whether it's alcohol, heroin, opioids. What you're addicted to is the brain chemicals it makes in your head, right? And so, because these drugs alter your brain, right? And your suggestibility is basically in your dorsal anterior, I can never say it right, singular gyrus, the DACG, that part of your brain, right? And it creates, it does other things, but one of the main things it creates is GABA, right? The neurochemical GABA, right? And GABA is a safety, it makes you feel safe. When you have high GABA, you feel safe, right? Now, if you think about hypnosis or being suggestible, if you don't feel safe, you will not relax. Anybody's been through advanced hypnosis training, that's what they, and all the research in therapy from psychology, the American Psych Association, and that they always say, the number one factor of whether a client will get the result they want is how comfortable they are with their therapist, whether it's cognitive behavior. Therapies are irrelevant. It's the comfort with the therapist, right? Which is interesting, right? And so, but this has to do with that part of your brain, the DACG, creating the GABA, right? And if the levels are high, you're more suggestible, right? And if you have a GABA deficiency, you're not very good hypnotic subject across the board. But also, if you have low GABA, you also don't enjoy movies. You don't enjoy anything relaxing, because if you have low GABA, it also affects the spinal fluid, which is a neurochemical called HVA. I can't hardly ever pronounce it. But again, it's all about being comfortable, right? So the people that have naturally low levels of this are schizophrenics, people with schizoaffective disorder, and paranoid people. They may be schizophrenic or not, but people with paranoid, they can never relax. Everything's a worry, right? So, when you need to do, a good hypnotist knows how to boost someone's, their GABA levels in their brain, right? And so it opens your mind to feeling safe and secure. Then you're more likely to take risks. You're more likely to follow instructions, right? Because what begins to happen, for things to really work, you're always working with people's perception, what's their perception of the world. Again, if you're nervous, if you're on edge, you're not going to be suggestible. You're not going to be able to relax. You won't be able to do things, right? And that could be based on the context. Where are you at? If you change the context of what's going on, right, it can, it might change your perception. And given the right focus, if you get the right perception, the right context, people give themselves the permission to do anything. The big argument that hypnotists make, you can't get people to do anything they don't want to do. You're naive, right? It's not that hard, right? Well, it could take some effort, and I defer to the Milgram experiment in 1962. I think it was Yale, right? Dr. Milgram took graduate students, and what it was the one where they were doing a study, and they said, okay, one person will be the experimenter and push a button, the other person will be the person that receives it. And what it was, they said, you're going to ask them these questions, and each time they get a wrong answer, it was to test whether pain helps you in learning. That was the setup for the study. And if you got a wrong answer, they shocked you. And for every wrong answer, they upped the shock. Classic, you can look this up, right? Because they didn't think that many people would really shock other people. Right? Now, the person running the experiment was just a person standing there in a white coat and a name tag. Right? No outward, no like, here's my identity, here's my thing. It was the illusion of authority. You are hardwired to respond to authority. And what Milgram, the reason he did the experiment, he'd been around the Nuremberg trials, where they were putting all the Nazis on trial for what they did during World War II. And then the Japanese, it was a different thing, the same thing. And all the officers said, I was just following orders. Right? And there, there was some question whether this would work. Why would you follow the orders? Why would you do this? It doesn't make sense. Right? But again, it's it'd be like, I would use the analogy that, a sports fan can always make a better play than the professional on the field, right? They can make the throw or the kick or whatever. Well, that's because you're not on the field. You don't, there's other things going on. So he said, let's set this up. And they estimated that very few people would do it. Well, what they found was everybody would at least do initial shocks. And then what it was is, as they got wrong answers, they kept turning up the dial. And finally, I think the highest was 450 in the original study. And then after 450 was XXX, which was fatal dose, right? Fatal shock. And they didn't think anybody would do that. Over 50% went all the way up to, now as they were cranking up the shots, you could hear the screaming in the other room. And the other person wasn't being shocked. It was all a setup, right? And, pounding and begging them to stop. People just kept cranking it up. And all the guy in the lab coat kept saying was, it's okay. It's an experiment. Let's keep going. And something, I always forget the exact number, but a high percentage went to fatal level. And those that did that, never, only like 3% wanted to go see if the person was okay. Because eventually they'd be screaming, then it would get silent. Right? So it kind of like, it was like one of those experiments. You can get people to do things given the right circumstances, right? Again, changing your perception, changing the context, right? Then it gives people the permission. And of course, following orders is the permission. Right? In fact, I know it changed how American military trains after World War II, and the British and the Canadian, I think most of the world, which is lawful orders. You're not supposed to do things that would be unlawful, but they never describe what that is. By the way, yeah, it's like, that's not a lawful order. Well, it is if the guy with the stars up here tells you to do something, in the American, it's like pretty much a lawful order. But anyway, so yeah, and again, given the right thing, right? So it really boils down to, how your brain works is, we call it the tricameo mind, or that's a theory. Some people argue it's not true, but you have your reptilian mind, which is like where the brainstem is, the cerebral spinal fluid, CSF comes down here. This is the part keeps your heart beating, your blood. I used to have your heart beating, your blood flowing, all that, right? Then above it, you have your mammalian brain, which is emotion, right? And lower level thought, right? Right here. But this part of your brain, the next level up, does not understand words. It does not process language, right? And then on top of the animal brain, the mammal brain, is the higher cortex, and this is the part that understands words. Okay? It's why thinking about something may not activate the part of your mind that's going to get down, activate the mammalian brain, which will activate or activate the animal brain, which will activate the reptilian brain and get you to take action. You know, I did that. If you ask, I could send you the video where it talks about how addiction hijacks all that part of your brain and goes down to the reptilian brain, and you start thinking the addiction, the drugs, the alcohol, the gambling, the sex, whatever the addiction is a survival mechanism, right? So you have to be able to like understand what's really going on with people, you know? And again, just generally that first level of X-ray, getting the visual, the auditory, the kinesthetic, doing, you know, getting some well-formedness conditions, as they call it, you know, meta model, what do you want? How would you know when you have it? All of those questions can focus some of this stuff at a deeper level, right? But then you need to look at like, you know, how do people really make decisions, right? And that's based on what's important to them, you know, and they say there's like 6 or 7. Some people call them human needs. Some people call them social needs. But I would call them, and some of the recent research says they're neurological needs. They're based on, again, going back to those brain chemicals. How do you get those brain chemicals going in your head? There are people that are, and just think about people you know. You don't have to rat yourself out. There are people you know that are driven by significance, right? They constantly want to stand out, right? They want the awards in this, right? They want the awards. They want to write all the books. They want to be important, right? And sometimes they'll show it, right? They'll have to, you know, they'll flash the Rolex, right? They'll tell you what kind of car they drive. They're significant, right? Because when they feel significant, they get the brain boosts. You're feeding their addiction. Okay? Some people need approval. And if you've ever done coaching or counseling, you've had this. The people that need approval, even when they don't need approval. Can I use a Kleenex? Because they're bawling their eyes out. Why would they ask? I mean, if it's on your desk, when I used to have my office set up that way, I had Kleenex everywhere because people would cry, right? But certain people would say, can I have a Kleenex? You know, and I'm not a capitalist enough to go, it's $1. No, I'm just lighten up, people. But I mean, they need approval, right? And again, if you know how to feed into that, now you go back to the Milgram experiment, they were kind of hitting the right factors on the right people, right? But if you need approval, you'll do anything to get approval. If you get the approval taken away, you know, a lot of this goes to your neurology. It's not a higher level thought thing, because up until 10,000 years ago, if you didn't get approval from your family or your tribe or the group you were with, it was a death sentence, right? That was a death sentence. So when I talk about these, we have them all. It just depends which one's more important. And some of it may change by context, right? Context, rather, right? And then you have people that are novelty, and novelty is important to them. They always have to look, you know, they have to stand out, right? Even though the way they try to stand out may fit them into a group that they want approval of. I always think of bikers, hardcore Harley guys, right? I'm a rugged individualist. And you look at them, you're like, no, you're not. You're wearing a leather vest. You got your colors on here, even if it's not a hardcore biker. You know what I mean? You've all seen it, right? See guys retired to Florida. You know, they're a retired businessman. See them 2 years later, they're wearing all the Harley leathers and they got a little ponytail. That's what all the Harley guys do. You know, I'm a rugged individualist. Dude, you were a corporate CPA for 40 years. You know, you just switch groups, right? And again, approval, go back to not just like that, but like when you go to like gated communities, upscale areas, everybody's driving the same kind of car or close, maybe a Beamer, maybe a Mercedes, maybe a Volvo, now maybe a high-end Cadillac, right? They all wear the Dockers with a polo shirt, whatever the corporate look is at the time. Everybody looks that way, right? And people that want approval will fit in well here in America in gated communities with homeowners association, who will not fit in well is the group that wants novelty. You know, I want to paint my house pink. It's not in the rules. You know, but I mean, but you seek novelty. You want to stand out. You want to be different. It goes a little bit with significance. You know, you go to a conference and you're walking around with red shoes on. Right? And you could say, oh, it's for comfort, but it's like, well, part of it is it stands out. It's novelty. You want to, they'll be the one that'll tell you they got the newest iPhone, whatever it is, right? Oh, it's the 15. You're like, didn't you have the 14 last month? Yeah, but they got to have the latest, greatest. They have to be novelty, you know, and maybe they'll join the group to be novel. I always think, you know, the whole hipster look with the beard, you know, but they all look the same. But in their mind, they're standing out. It's significance, but at the same time, they're fitting approval. If this makes sense, right? You know, I live in Florida where it's ungodly hot most of the year, and you see all these people walk around with watch caps on, knit watch caps. It's like your head can't be cold. It's 95 degrees with 80% humidity. But they want to be different. They want to stand out, right? So you have your significance, your approval, your novelty, and you'll have different levels of these. Then you have people that want to just show they're smart, right? Even when it's not called for. You're just talking to somebody. Well, I went to Harvard. Okay. Just to show you they're smart. So they'll mention their degrees, their certifications. We see that a lot in the hypnosis NLP coaching world, how many certifications they have. Even though intellectually, if you pull back, most of the certifications, they're not worth anything except to the organization issue, right? But again, if you know, if you're dealing with somebody that needs to be significant, you point out that you know how important it is, how many people they'll help. Let's say you're trying to sell a course, right? How it'll help them be more visible in the world, right? Maybe they want to be novel. It'd be, you know, you want to be the first person in the hypnosis NLP world to take this, you know, behavior profiling kind of course, right? That'll be, you know, that'll give you a novelty, right? Show that you're intelligent. And then we have a few people, and this happens to all of us. All of these are running in your head at any given time, that they're driven by pity, self-pity. Well, they'll tell you how bad they had it, what bad happened to them. But if something bad happens to you, some of us here have been through some bad things, right? You're going to go through pity for a while. It's a natural part of how your brain works. But are you still talking about it 20 years later? Right? Viktor Frankl talked a lot about that he refused to live in pity. And he had it pretty rough. If you ever read his history, it's like, you may have had it rough. I don't know if you've had everyone you ever met in your life executed in front of you like he did, right? But he didn't want to live in pity, right? But some people will. But the worst thing you can tell someone that's feeling pity in self-pity or on the pity pot, as we would say in recovery, is think about all the things you could be grateful for. Think about a time you've been in self-pity and someone says that. What's your response? I can guarantee you it's this. Okay. At that moment, maybe, you know, it's like you're trying to help, but no. Right. And of course, that kind of person, all you got to say is, I understand. It's been rough. That's what they want to hear. And you can't, you know, you can't help, you can't solve a problem you're not willing to have. And while you're in pity, you're not willing to admit it's pity. So, and then last, we see this is people that want to show strength. They have to be strong, right? And whether they are strong or not is irrelevant, right? And I hate to sound this way, but I always think of the guy that's way out of shape with a big gut that's wearing this skin tight Captain America shirt. Right? And then he'll go back and tell you, well, in high school, I was like all American, you know, all whatever it was. It's like, yeah, well, that obviously was a lifetime ago. But they want to be strong, right? And they'll tell you how strong they are, right? And then you'll bounce back and forth from these. Not to be political, but we've seen it play out in the media recently. And you can bounce back and forth quickly, right? Right? I will take his inventory, and this one was Donald Trump. He'll tell you for how the strongest, smartest man in the world, and then he'll go into a self-pity rant. Right? Which is fine because we all operate on these levels, right? So, you know, so you have to figure that out, because if you don't know what's really driving them, this is what's behind the curtain. It's even behind the x-ray. It's more three-dimensional. So they may present this thing of, now, if you look at these real quick, you know, we'll be going into like, you know, what's the biggest fear of each one of these? You know, if your big need is to feel strong, is for someone to point out how weak you are. Right? That's your fear. Fear can get you to take action. Right? If someone's driven by intelligence, and you point out the things they don't know, drives them nuts. Okay? Someone driven by novelty. Oh, I got my, excuse me, let me check my iPhone 15. You know, oh, it's still hooked to my Beamer. You know, so they're, you know, they're showing you, you know, the novelty thing. And you point out, well, you know, the next phone's coming out next month. And isn't that a 2-year-old model? Right? Oh my God, that's their fear. That's why you got the curtain up. That's why you're the wizard from the Wizard of Oz behind the curtain. You're this all-powerful wizard when in fact, you know, what it is, right? Same with people that seek approval. All you have to do is remove approval, right? That, like I said, and then same with significance. If you point out how someone is not significant, if they're significance driven, it'll drive them crazy, right? And you know what's kind of interesting? There's this caveat in there about people that, you know, they're kind of into that significance intelligence thing when they say, I don't care what people think. That lets you know they care what people think. Because if they really don't care, they're not even going to say it. You know? But I mean, it's this. So you have these, you know, you have these neurological needs that light up your neurological decision patterns, right? And so this is kind of really cool stuff that goes on, right? So that's, you know, because again, you know, we're messing with how people actually think, right? Because really what you're doing, you're constantly wanting to train the mammalian part of your brain, because that's what drives everything, not your cortex. You know? I said a long time, and people look at me funny when I'm teaching like anchoring or anything in the basic NLP. It's like, you know, it's like Pavlov's response. I remember one of the first times I trained it, someone says, so what are you saying? People are just like trained dogs? I said, yeah, pretty much. You ring the right bell, you'll get the reaction, you know? And the person that wanted to argue it right at noon goes, well, it's noon, isn't it lunchtime? Right? No, not necessarily, but I mean, we are. So, you know, it's like, how do you know, we want to train this part of your mind, right? And the way you train this part of your mind, one guy, I'm trying to think of his name, he phrased it greatly, brilliantly, in fact. He calls it the fear model, right? Which is focusing, emotion, agitation, and repetition. That's how you train, right? Focus, you got to get someone's focus, right? You know, so if you have someone's focus, right? That's the only way you can activate, but focus is just focus. It's may not activate you, right? For that to happen, you have to go down to the mammalian brain and activate the emotion. And again, your emotion does not understand words. It has to make a three-dimensional, multi-sensory experience to light that up. Right? They always talk about, how movies changed, even though they're still pretty much two-dimensional, unless you're watching 3D, when they started adding surround sound. That one little change changed how a movie goes in your head, right? Like watching Top Gun Maverick, you could hear the jet start behind you if you're in a theater, and then it would go over you. That's sensory rich, and that's what activates the emotion, right? And again, your mind doesn't know the difference between real or a vividly imagined event. It doesn't say intellectually imagined event, right? So if you got the focus, then you light up the emotions, and you're not going to make a change or anything's going to happen in your life unless you're unhappy with where you are, right? What is it Tony Robbins says? The worst drug to be addicted to is comfort. And if you're comfortable, you'll never change, right? Something has to agitate you. Maybe it's just, I'm sick of where I'm at. I'm sick of being overweight. I'm sick of being broke, right? Because that'll go back and refocus your reticular activating system even more, right? Light up more emotions. And then the only way you make it stick is repetition, right? Because again, the kind of thing that this class will be talking about too is the people confuse discipline with a habit, right? Because I work out a lot. People go, I wish I had your discipline. I go, I got no discipline when it comes to working. It's a habit. I do it without thinking. Same way how you drive your car, you don't have to think about it, right? How do you make something go from to get to the habit stage, right? Well, that's the only time you need discipline, and you really only need a small amount, right? And then if you do it enough, you hit the repetition phase, it'll become a habit. Anyway, the guy that wrote a book on habits talks about that once it becomes a habit, you don't think about how you make your coffee, how you do this, right? So, this is, we're going to be talking about all these cool things on how to take your communication to the next level, right? And some of it's painful when you realize what really drives you. Is it significance? Is it approval, or where you're at right now? May not be all the time. Novelty, intelligence, right? Pity, strength, and then how do you make your decision? Be a big part of what we do. There's generally, people make decisions based on, again, neurological needs. Do you have the need to be deviant? Right? And these tie into some of your level of your neurological needs, right? People that like novelty and sometimes that like intelligence like to be deviant. Deviate from the norm. So that's all that means, right? So if you're trying to sell somebody something and you're going on approval or significance, they just want to be different. They want to be different from the group, right? So I have the purple hair and the 17 earrings or whatever it happens to be, right? Some people will make a decision based on, is this new? That's a deep neurological need. Is this new? You'll always notice what's different. Some people only make decisions when it's necessary. And again, going with approval, some people will only make decisions to conform with the group. If you're asking them to make a decision that goes against the group, it's going to be difficult. And then every once in a while, you have people that make decisions. Everything they make is based on an investment mindset. Okay? How will this play off in the future? which is okay. None of these are right or wrong, but you can get stuck, right? You know, they say that, you know, true happiness is when you balance the things you need or want right now with the things the future you will need. Some people go too far this way. When I watch those investment guys that act like never buy a new car, never do this, save all your money. I always think, I live in Florida. I've known a lot of people that struggle or saved every dime, never bought all the stuff they wanted, never took the vacations to live comfortably in Florida, and they have a stroke and all that's gone. Right here in America, where we have horrible health care, they're taking all your money, right? And so you end up in, you finally make it to Florida, but you're like, eh. Right? So it's balancing the two. No, you can't totally disregard the future you, but if that's, you know, maybe you've had family members that saved so much when it got time to enjoy their life, they couldn't spend money. You know, I mean, like, why don't you buy that? Well, it's expensive. You're worth $100 million. I think you could afford it. You know, and sometimes it's obvious. It's like, you know, Warren Buffett, from the best of my knowledge, has never bought a new car. Right? Part of it, he says he really doesn't want it, but it's like, it's not a good investment. Like, dude, you have more accumulated wealth than all the other people in the United States outside the 1% combined twice over. Buying the new Cadillac's not going to break the bank. And one time he even admitted that maybe he went a little bit overboard on some of that, right? But again, it's balancing that. That's the paradox, right? So, you know, so that's the kind of stuff we're going to be going over that, right? So it's going to be a lot of fun. The class will, you know, it's Wednesdays, June 19th through, I think it's July 10th, and I may throw in an extra day, but we'll be going over some of the stuff about like how these agencies and these places use this information, right? How they can negotiate and get people to do some pretty amazing things. Right? And it's, again, it's based on the brain and how everything works, right? So yeah, so that's kind of a quick overview of some of the stuff I'm going to teach in the class, right? You know, how your brain works with at a deeper level to, like I say, NLP, basic NLP is the X-ray. Master NLP is you add a deeper level because you're doing the waking hypnosis, which is the way we do it. And then this is the Wizard of Oz level, where you're looking behind the curtain to see what's the wizard really controlling back there to get people to take action. Right? So if you have any questions, reach out, and it'll be a lot of fun. HortonPsychology.com. HortonPsychology.com.